I just linked up my tribute to Bill Russell in full that I've made on my YouTube channel. You could also find it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And that was, straight from the heart. Use some quotes from Russell's book that I read, his first book in 1965, Go for Glory. Highly recommend it because it's pretty short. And yeah, if you want to go check that out, please show some love. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you're into NBA history because I make, a lot of videos on historical players, whether it be film breakdowns of the games, just seeing the game from my lens, or talking about the history of the game. So it's linked up there in the jumbotron. So take a peek at it after this space. But I appreciate the guys in here: Clipper Soul, Ahmad, Ty, Hoops, Jay. Appreciate you guys.
Appreciate everyone, Warren, Nico, everyone that's in here. Yeah, Ryan, Dime Dropper, he pretty much does video. Subscribe to him on YouTube, and you'll see just the plethora of videos he has deep in NBA history. And you can watch it on YouTube. I post spaces on. I have an upcoming podcast on NBA history, and I'm going to be writing some pieces on some things also coming this fall. I will also have, some writing, some articles that accompany my work. So definitely check both of us out, and we will continue to do some joint spaces.
You're gonna
So,
have a
Dime,
podcast on. You're gonna have a podcast on basketball history, Malika, and you haven't told me about it.
I have a podcast coming on the Rewind.
Oh man, that's
Yes,
awesome. It's gonna be on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
that's. I mean, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, that's what's coming. Absolutely, I'll keep you
That's
abreast.
awesome.
And you know what? It's 8:05, so you know what? No rest for the weary. You want to get started.
Sure. Well, where do you want to begin?
I want to begin because when people talk about Bill Russell, they always talk about his greatness and playing in the 60s. But Bill Russell was born February 12th, 1934, in the middle of the Great Depression in his country. And he was born in the South. He was born in Louisiana. And he was born in the South. And he grew up in very challenging conditions. Like think about growing up and your mother telling you to come inside just so she could shield you from racism, and what was going on outside and shield as much as possible. Growing up, he witnessed his parents being disrespected, because they were black. Like, his father, which is, a story that he's talked about a few times, him being at a gas station and refused service because the staff, wanted to take care of a white customers first. And, like a different station where an attendant stuck a shotgun in his face. So he was been through these things before you think about going to college and playing ball. Like this was his background. So before we get into some of the things that happened, like he participated in while he was playing ball, you can see the roots from whence he comes. And before we even get there, you had some players in basketball love story that was on ESPN said he was the first man they knew that ever used the term black, because you remember Negro was the term before black, and he was calling himself black before it was the fashionable term. So I wanted to present that side of it. Besides him being uh, one of the goats. Like, I know we don't like saying one of the goats, but for the '60s era, he is. Up to me, he is one of the goats from that era. Other being Will Chamberlain, but that's Dime, take it.
I was gonna say, why just that era? He's one of the goats. Period. I mean, he had the most
Yeah,
championships
all
in the
time.
history
Yeah.
of the game, and obviously I mean, when it comes to on and off court impact, I just really don't. I think he's got a pretty sizable margin over the next guy in particular. I mean, Kareem has a great claim for that as well, but Bill is just the original. He's the guy that Kareem looked up to. If you guys didn't check out Kareem's article that he posted, go check it out. It wasn't that long, but obviously very touching. And I recall another story from his book that he was talking about. I heard the gas station one, and that was obviously, I mean, I don't even want to use the word traumatizing because there's so many incidents like that that it probably became kind of normal for him, which is terrible. But that's just how the reality of what life was like back then at that time. But there was one story where he was with his dad, Charlie, and he was fishing with one of Charlie's friends. And like at the end of the conversation, he was like, he told him, "Yeah, Charlie, you've always been a good N word." And I was like, and Bill was like, "Wow, that's the way he talked to my dad. Like that's his friend. Like that's just a good, not a good friend, a good that." And it's just like he said, we left our friend in quotation marks after that. It's just like even the people that his dad was close to, that seemed like they respected him, at the same time they had this kind of what do I call it? It's like a built-in kind of prejudice, even if they weren't as racist per se as as actual very blatant
It was the
racists at the time.
norm. We got to
Yeah,
remember the
exactly.
time. It was the norm.
To see his dad get called boy and all these different things. I mean, just I can't I can imagine the fire burning up inside him. And obviously that's I don't know if you've heard that story. You probably have though, I assume. Of his mom. He said he got like slapped in the face and his mom was like, "You're gonna go door to or find that kid and fight that kid." And he got into like 5 fights, came back crying, and his mom was happy for him for standing up for himself. So just a fighter, in the verbally and physically.
Yeah, throughout his career, one of the things that is a constant with Bill Russell, as we talk about him, is he demanded respect as a man. Period. He demanded the respect that of being a man. He was not going to tolerate being treated different, being treated less than the next man. It just what it wasn't an option. And if he felt any type of disrespect, um, it wasn't a good thing. Like, so that was his thing, like being respected as a man, whether you liked him or not, you were going to respect him. And that's one of the lasting impressions he left on anyone, whether you liked him or not. Respect me.
Yep, that's what he kept saying in the book was just a man. I just want to be considered a man, just like everyone else. And it's just kind of crazy to read a book and hear a player talk like that, talking about something that simple. I just want to be respected as a man. Now you have guys in the last 20 years. They want to be the next Michael Jordan. They want to be the next Kobe, LeBron. Like wanting to be great for different reasons, for stardom, for people to worship them. And Russ just wanted respect, and people ended up being fans of him and worshiping him in their own way, in his own way. And I think he's kind of set an example without even trying, really. And that's what makes Bill one of the reasons that Bill was such a special figure in sports and in society.
No, we got to go back and forth between talking about civil rights and his fight during that time and beyond, continued mentoring of players, even through his 80s. But let's start talking about his career. And one of the things I think is important before we start talking about his playing career in the NBA was in the 1950s, there was a quota system for the NBA. And black players had to find means of earning a living because of the quota system. But so many black players on the team. So one of the things that they were able to do is play for the Harlem Globetrotters. Now, do you want to go through this story, Dime, or you want me to continue?
Take it away. I'll let you keep going.
And so like Bill was expecting a decent offer, which at the time would have been in his like $50,000 or so. And they gave him an offer, him and Oscar Robertson actually, was a player that they were trying to covet, $17,500. But they also told him that they would bring, like a movie star to his room, like also it's kind of like sweetening the pot. And Bill Russell was like, I don't want a woman that you can just bring in here and tell her to spend a night with me. I don't want a woman like that. And he also rejected the deal because him and his father were insulted by the amount. And he was like, there was a perception that the Harlem Globetrotters had all this money, and that's not that wasn't the case. If they did have it, they weren't offering it to their players.
Yeah, and I think part of the rumor that he was gonna be a Globetrotter was believed, I think by I think we were having a conversation about this in the history chat about the Royals, who had the first pick in the draft in '56, uh, thought maybe that he would end up going with the Globetrotters, and that's part of the reason why they didn't pick him. But they also had um, Maurice Stokes at the center position at the time, so maybe they didn't think that they needed a center at that time as well. But I know that Globetrotter rumor of he was gonna get offered 50K was part of the reason. I've heard one of the rumors, that whole Rochester thing of why they didn't pick Bill Russell is like a lot of stories about it. I think honestly the most the most act like reasonable description I'd say is that they just had Maurice Stokes and they didn't feel. And I know there were some doubts based on what Russell said in his book and various other articles and stuff that people, even though he had won all those things at San Francisco, people still questioned whether he would be a great fit for the NBA, how great he would really be. So, yeah, the Globetrotters were interesting at that time, but Russell did say in his book too that overall he felt he could make more money long term in professional basketball. So but that wasn't interesting. The Globetrotters offering players like Wilt and Bill, it was just an interesting angle at that time they were actual competition to the NBA.
And Oscar Robinson also got an offer.
Yeah,
So it was interesting because, with the quota system, that was a way that the Harlem Globetrotters were siphoning talent, at that time. Hey, we could just pick up some of the best black players in the world, you
yeah,
know what I mean?
taking advantage of that in the
And
early
take advantage
'60s.
of the situation, give them a few dollars. And, like a lot of players took advantage of that, Bill, like Wilt Chamberlain being one of them. But Bill wasn't. Bill had this thing where you're not buying me. No, no, this is he didn't like him offering the woman and basically and also he said that the owner felt he was called an ungrateful Negro by the owner of the Harlem Globetrotters. So because he wouldn't take the offer. So I'm just picturing and Bill just thought it was hilarious. So so now we can get into talking about the NBA. And it's interesting when we talk about Bill Russell. I think people have a misconception, and I know me and Diane talked about this before. Like he never, Bill never, his average was 15 points a game. His rebounds, like that they're saying because they didn't really track rebounds at 73, 74. But I
No,
digress.
that's blocks, rebounds they had.
Blocks,
Yeah,
rebounds 22.5 per game.
that's ridiculous.
And that's ridiculous when you think about so the blocks. This is what I wrote down. Like we have no idea how many blocks. And I saw film after film of Bill blocking, block. But we'll never know the true number. But he made his bread and he had his calling in defense. He wasn't trying to be the dominant scorer. He wanted to be that player on the floor that stopped the best player on the other team and got wins. His thing was getting wins, not trying to be the star. He just wanted to win. Hence the 11 rings. But go ahead, Don.
No, I mean you said it best. The blocks thing is a huge harm. I think it's personally a harm to Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell's legacies because if you got to remember in the '60s and early '70s, teams are taking 90 plus shots a night. That's more than today. And there's no three point line. So that means they're all going to the rim. So many shots are being taken around the basket. And especially with the inability to throw your body into defensive players like you can today, those being offensive fouls or player control fouls, as they used to call them, that really gives the shot blockers an advantage. So people need to view the game when you evaluate '60s players. I've heard people say, oh, well, Bill Russell's numbers, like today, he would just be a glorified so and so low level all star. And it's like you have to understand the time that he played was so favorable to the big man, and he kind of revolutionized the way. Before people were told to stay on their feet, just put a hand up, but he blocked shots and he made it an art form where not only just blocked the shot, he kept it in bounds to ignite the break, and that just changed the game and was their version of revolutionizing the game with the spread offenses like and the ball movement like the Warriors have in this era. That was their thing. Fast break, defense leads to offense. Always had a number one defense with Bill, top two defense, and they let that. You watch the games, even though there's very few, you can see it. Russell gets the rebound, he's immediately looking to push the ball, immediately looking to throw it up to Kuz or Hondo, whoever it is. And yeah, the blocks thing is ridiculous. There's been newspaper articles, like I know, for example, 1968, the first ever, guys, 3-1 comeback in history against the Sixers. The Celtics came back, and in game 7, Bill Russell had 10 blocks. It documented, it's on a newspaper article. And imagine how many games he probably had those kind of numbers. He probably averaged 5+ blocks every single year of his career. I would not be surprised if he did. So it's a total detriment to his legacy because I feel like, well, not for me, because I think people in this chat that are big historians can kind of, estimate that Wilt and Bill probably have more blocks than Akeem. But it does, just not having that number, it does definitely hurt them if you look at the statistics.
Yeah, for him and Will, like I feel like it does both of them just an injustice because we will never know those
Yeah,
numbers. So
imagine Wilt just having another statistical category where he's just 10 times better than everybody else. I mean, as if he needs any more statistical assistance. But it's the truth.
and it's absolutely the truth that we brought up hoops and Ty. Any points you want to make as we talk about, Bill and what Bill's overall, basketball legacy and his passion to win and just insights of Bill as a player.
I was gonna add about the situation with the Globetrotters. Um, I'm reading King of the Court by Aram. I'm gonna butcher his name. Goodsuzian. Basically, it's another Russell biography, and in it, he talks about how Russell goes to meet with the head of the Globetrotters at the time, and he comes with his college coach Phil Wolpert. And when he gets there, after making those offers that you were talking about with the woman, which I'm pretty sure was just like prostitution, basically, the owner just turned all the negotiation part of the deal to Wolpert and didn't even acknowledge Russell like in the slightest because he was black. And Russell was disrespected by that. And that was part of the reason that went into him deciding not to go with the Globetrotters.
Wow, that's great stuff.
Not surprising when you consider in the time. Go ahead, Ty.
Oh no, I just wanted to add in that I feel like the young generation are kind of lucky today when it comes to the stance on like the 60s players, because if they had the available accolades which we do now, right, like a finals MVP, like a defensive player of the year, Bill Russell would have such a stronger case and it would be respected so much more if they were available, especially the blocks. Like I feel like 5 is the bare minimum of blocks he had. Like that's, and I also feel like I'm kind of lowballing it because his ability to deter the defenders from the paint, pick up on a guard, and then switch back was really ridiculous, especially for a time like the 60s.
Yeah, and if I could just add about Russell's overall playing ability, I feel like people underestimate his athleticism because of the time. Like, we're talking about an absolute like physical specimen. The size and athleticism of Dwight Howard, probably more than athletic Dwight Howard, but that's the best comparison I can make based on who younger fans know. He has the IQ and the length of Draymond Green. He had a 7'4" wingspan and he was only 6'10". And then he had that vertical ability too. So his radius of like blockable shots was basically only surpassed by Wilt. And if we had the numbers, Wilt, Russell, and Thurman would probably be 1, 2, and 3 on that block list.
Yeah, and I think one of the things before we start going deeper into his NBA career, when we talk about the start of when you talk about some of these greats, um, like Bill Russell, he struggled at first to develop his skills as a basketball player. He was a track and field player, like athlete for the most part when he was younger, also all the way into college. He did not understand how to play the game at first, so he was cut from his junior high school team, and he was cut from his high school team as a freshman. He was almost cut again, but his raw athletic ability and he had a way of playing defense that was different from what they were seeing at the time. So with his work ethic and working hard and working with, he developed the skills, necessary to stay on the team and to continue to develop and continue getting better. And I thought it was interesting also that in college, his college coach told him that uh, college coach thought good defense was not your feet not leaving the floor, and so he tried to play that way, but he noticed that players were getting layups and layup at the layup. So then he went to play his way, and his coach did not think he was a good player. That's crazy. And this is his college coach.
The story. Oh, my bad, Ty. Go ahead.
No. You go first. You go first.
I was gonna say I mentioned it in my video, but his coach at McClymonds in Oakland, um, he tried out for varsity, and he didn't make it. And his brother Charlie was at Oakland Tech, and was a better athlete at that age than him. And the coach said, "Why is it that when we get two brothers, we always get the bum?" And it's just Bill Russell said that he never forgot him say that. And I mean, those are little things. I mean, I think anybody can relate in their lives. Whatever you may be, you definitely have people that tell you you're not going to do this. You're not going to, whatever your dream may be, you're not going to, they may laugh at what you're saying if you have big dreams and all that. And he's not even saying anything. He just got dissed for no reason. But that type of shit sticks and really motivates people of any profession. If you really take that stuff personally, and Bill did. And he definitely didn't lack motivation in his life and career. That's for sure. But yeah.
We have
Go ahead, Ty.
Bleacher. We have Bleacher Dave also, and Jay Ernani on the stage as well. But yeah, go ahead, Ty.
Oh no, I just wanted to thank you that you kind of reminded me about the track and field thing, and that's what also made him so unique of how agile he was for a big, and how quick he could get down the court. Like it was ridiculous. Like talking about like Baylor was a really quick guy also, and he was keeping up with him.
Okay. Either Bleacher or Jay, do y'all want to say anything before we? Okay, Jay's gone. Bleacher, do you want to say anything before we start talking about the NBA career?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for allowing me to come up. I'm a third generation Oakland native. My family, since 1950, my family has lived across the street from Hoover, now elementary, former Hoover Junior High School, that junior high school team that Bill Russell was cut from. And I live here now today, and I'm actually looking at that schoolyard. And so it is impossible for me to express to folks out there how important and pivotal Bill Russell is and was to Oakland's identity and pride. Him coming from Monroe, Louisiana, at a time during the second Great Migration when Black people were flooding into Oakland in their tens of thousands from the South, and really creating this athletic legacy that includes not only Bill Russell, as the first Black head coach of a major professional league sport, but as well as Frank Robinson, who very briefly was a teammate of his on the basketball team at McClymonds, and they're breaking new ground for Black folks in sport from a relatively little small town who all came from these relatively rural Black Southern migrant roots is a mystery and a story and a wonder that so much talent came out of such a small pool and a small base of all these folks that are living here. And so, for us, and that that great legacy of McClymonds High School in the 50s. My mom is a 1960 graduate of McClymonds, so a little bit. I think my uncle is 62, a little bit, 8 and 10 years, after Russell's early graduation, since he graduated in that December, to go on tour throughout Northern California, which is where he was spotted by, I think what I read, an unpaid Oakland High coach, and referred to the coach at USF as how he got his scholarship. Because frankly, while they won two Tournament of Champions or TOC championships his junior and senior year, McClymonds won those. California did not have a statewide formal championship in those years. It was the de facto championships of Invitational. He was not a renowned basketball player in high school.
Bleacher,
He
I'm gonna
did.
need you to land your plane in like a minute, just so we can move forward. You got another minute.
All right. Thank you for helping me with that. And so, just to be able to tune in and hear you talk about, him and his early roots, it's really a moment of reflection here around, him really being part of a great legacy of sports in here. His coach, high school coach, George Powell, was very influential in basketball and baseball, and is just a town dude. So if town business is what we be doing, and Dame literally is the current expression of the ultimate Oakland cat, certainly Bill Russell may be the root. And we appreciate you for letting me talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming up. Of course, we know that Bill Russell was drafted in '56 by the St. Louis Hawks, but he was traded, and he was a Celtic for life, whether they wanted him or not. So let's get into his Celtics years, guys. He was a rookie. He was in 1956. His rookie campaign. Let's talk about that season.
I'll start.
Dime, where you want to go? Yeah,
Oh,
you can go. You can go, Hoops.
I was just gonna say, Russell. It's fair to say that Russell joined a team that was already on their way to being dominant. But as soon as Russell joins the team halfway through the season, because you got to remember he was on the Olympic team that was in Australia, and they were touring the world actually during the season. So he comes directly after winning a college championship, winning gold in the Olympics, and then joins the Celtics, and immediately they become an all-time great team.
Very true. Like, people, they had Bob Cousy on that team already. They had I'm forgetting the names off the top of my head.
Tommy
Lord.
Heinsohn.
Tommy Heisen. Yep.
Yeah, ended up being rookie of the year that year. I know Russ said in his book that kind of made him angry, but I mean, if you're a voter, I mean, he only played 48 games, so it was hard to make the case for Bill, but he made his impact in the playoffs, no doubt about it. Oh, did you want me to say more?
I actually was the Dime. Don't laugh, but I was talking and I was on mute. It's interesting because Bill was the piece that they needed. Like they were a solid team. They had Bill Sharman also, but they were being scored on like crazy. It's like they needed that Bill Russell. They needed that stopper, that shot blocker, that rebounder. And Bill Russell, once they got that role from Bill Russell, it was off to the races for this team. Like he was the missing piece because they felt they really couldn't really compete with Mikan. One of the George Mikan from the Minneapolis Lakers. I see you unmuted. Go ahead, talk time. Just go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say 55-56 Boston Celtics, sixth in the league out of 8 teams in defensive rating, and then the following year with Bill first. So that doesn't
That's
tell
crazy.
You everything right there.
Right. Jada Wakanda's in here. Jay, we're going through his. We're about to go through his Celtics career. Anything you want to add, Jay?
Yeah. Bill won like 55 games in a row, which people don't really talk about because of that great UCLA run. And then that summer he wins a gold medal, and then he wins a championship his rookie year. And so that's the problem I have when people say, well, Draymond is the greatest defender in league history, when Bill Russell basically invented the defensive shot blocking, rebounding big man as a key championship piece in NBA basketball. And him and Cousy kind of co-founded the fast break together, or the concept of a fast break. And so Bill Russell's impact on the game, as far as what do you want your leader to be? What do you want your defensive captain to be? What do you want your community? How do you want your star guy to behave and perform in the community? Bill Russell set the standard for that when he didn't have um, kind of a shoulder to stand on, so to speak, in that regard. I mean, he had Jackie Robinson, of course, but as far as an NBA player doing what Bill did, both on and off the court, he didn't have that, and so for him to kind of do that and do it on the fly while serving, because you had the draft back then as well, and so like Bill Russell's accomplishments and impact on the game are kind of overshadowed by Wilt's individual brilliance. But you could argue that Bill had this just an equal amount of impact as Wilt. It just was in different things. Like Wilt was the individual talent, but Bill was
the champion.
Bill was the French. Yeah, Bill was kind of the franchise cornerstone blueprint guy. I mean, you had Mikan obviously before him, but Mikan wasn't Bill Russell. No offense to George Mikan. And Bill's, and I hate saying nice things about Celtics, but Bill's amazing. When you really get into it and watch the film and really understand what the league was before and after him. I can't say enough good things about Bill Russell.
Thank you. Go ahead, Don.
I was gonna say I know it's we're praising Bill Russell, but I was just looking at his Wikipedia right now, and it was just something cool that came up about this first year, and it just tells you how the public perception of Bill Russell. I feel like when I grew up with everyone saying this guy's an angel. He's so jolly and funny and he laughs and everything. But that was not the case when he was first in the league. And he also had a different demeanor. I mean, he's obviously, we talk about the racial tension, all the stuff he's going through off the court. I mean, that's not something to just be smiley and joyful about when you're an older man that's retired. But it says at the time, Russell received much negative publicity as a player. He was notorious for his public surliness and judgmental attitude towards others, because Russell ignored virtually any well-wisher who approached him home or away, including the vast majority of media. His autograph was among the most difficult to secure of any professional athlete of his time. But yeah, but it just shows you, Russ was big on not signing autographs, I think, because, I mean, same as Kareem, I think he didn't trust people. And
I was about to say Kareem. That
Yeah.
brings to mind Kareem and
They
his
would sell it
reputation
and
as
all that.
well. One of the things I think is, Bill winning the MVP in 58. And of course, that was when players voted for the MVP. He won the MVP in 1958. That was just his second season. And then, but they lost the finals that year. But then they would win 8 in a row from 1958 to 1966. That's insane. That's insane. This is the record. I remember it's a story circulating this week where Bill and Michael Jordan were on a golf course, and Mike said to Bill, "We're coming after your record." I think he meant this: the 8 straight NBA championships. And Bill was like, "I don't think you can do it. I don't think you have enough years to do it." And which one you're trying to break? Because he had so many, but I think it was this one because the Bulls were winning so much. But guys, let's talk about this 8-year straight championships. That's an amazing statistic. That's crazy that they were able to do that.
Well, a lot of these dynasties that we have, whether it be not the Showtime Lakers, the three-peat Lakers, or the Bulls, you feel a little bit of pain before you start it. And the pain that Russ felt was in that second year, being injured in the finals and losing to the Hawks after winning MVP in the regular season. And boy, I mean, talk about responding to defeat. 8 straight titles. I think, honestly, the first one was probably the easiest. Not to say that any title is easy. I think people really downplay his titles for the various reasons of just the less teams and there'd be less rounds in the beginning. But as you alluded to, I mean, it didn't matter what the circumstances were. You can add more teams to the league. You can add more rounds. You can add more games in each round. The Celtics still came out victorious. And, when people say they only had to play 2 rounds to get to win the championship, you need to get the number 1 seed to get that first round bye. I know in 1980, the Lakers had a first round bye. They only played the Suns, the Sonics, and the Sixers. Those are the 3 series they played to win the championship. And nobody holds it against Kareem and Magic for that championship. But they don't keep the same energy with Bill and some of his because people just don't do the research. But the Celtics to get the number 1 seed year in, year out is a testament to how hungry they were, their commitment to winning, and just also good luck in terms of health. I mean, I can't imagine they were fully healthy all the time, but no major injuries at that time is just incredible. They have to be in such amazing shape to be doing this year in, year out. And to keep having the motivation, like we thought the Warriors were going to win so many championships with KD and stuff. And, the third year, you have an injury. I mean, that stuff just happens. And tension sometimes. You look at Shaq and Kobe. But for them, I know there wasn't free agency, but they all got along so well in terms of not everybody's best friends, but they all respected one another. So there was the chemistry is so good, and they all had one collective goal to win, and they did that year in, year out. But go ahead, Hoops.
I was gonna ask, did you guys want to get into like the details of each individual season? Because he was like, there was different narratives every single year about why the Celtics wouldn't win. Like it's truly incredible. Like every year, the sports writers at the time just assumed there was no way the streak could keep going, and it just did.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would love. I mean, it's obviously Malika's space, but I would love to get into that because you could argue they would have won Bill's second year if Bill didn't get hurt.
Exactly.
So yeah, no, I mean he's Bill. Like I said, man, Bill's his ultimate winner, and he just kind of had this knack of being what his team needed when his team needed it. Because although he wasn't a prolific night in, night out scorer, he'd have games where he'd show up. And you're talking about a guy who averaged, I think doesn't he average like 20 rebounds plus a game for his career?
22.
Yeah, that's insane. You know what I'm saying? Like that's nuts. Like even if you account for pace of play and all that stuff, 22 rebounds a night is just a phenomenal and maniacal work ethic. And so yeah.
Hoops, we can't get into that. You guys can do the narrative that was there per season. Especially during this run. And I'll weave in some of the civil rights and historical stuff that Bill was involved in also during these years. So we can go with the first. We'll go first. Terry, Terry. That's Terry. We can go with Terry will go, and then we'll go, then we'll go back to Hoops. Go ahead, Terry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to take my hand down. Someone stole my thunder.
Oh.
Discussing, well, sort of discussed took a little bit of my thunder when he talked about his demeanor, his and Kareem's, and they do have parallels in their careers. I was just thinking. I was very thankful and I have a lot of gratitude that the fact that he stayed alive long enough to enjoy the accolades that came after the new wave of accolades that came after the top 75 list was produced, and then they started putting together the most renowned sports publications started putting together their top 10 all time, and Bill Russell was deep into that top 10 in all of those lists, him and Kareem and Wilt. And so people began to ask, well, who is this guy? The new generation of sports fans, the casual fans are like finding out just how great of an athlete and how much he accomplished. Like, he was not just the cornerstone of the Boston Celtics. He was the cornerstone of the NBA. He pretty much is synonymous with the early days of the NBA. So I'm just very grateful for that, it was a little serendipity there that the top 75 came out and he passed about 6 months later so that people could enjoy him and he could get his flowers once again while he was still alive. And so that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Terry. Dime and Hoops, y'all want to get into the narrative for that 8-year run?
Sure. I mean, I'll start really briefly because the first one's kind of quick, unless Hoops has more info on it. But beat the Syracuse Nationals in 7 games in the conference finals or division finals as it was back then. There were no conferences yet. And then swept probably this had to be the easiest of their finals. I think the only one that they swept anybody was this Elgin Baylor's rookie season. I don't think the Lakers were even supposed to get to the finals, but Elgin just went off and they swept them. And it says Laker head coach John Kundla says, "We don't fear the Celtics without Bill Russell. Take him out and we can beat them. He's the guy who whipped us psychologically." So it's big time praise from the other coach.
The only thing I'd add about 59 was a crazy stat from the finals when they swept the Lakers. Russell averaged 30 rebounds that series, 30 rebounds a game, and he out-rebounded the Lakers' top 2 rebounders combined.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, when you watch the film, guys, I mean, Bill Russell gets every rebound in sight. And here's one thing I'm actually happy that I was reminded of this, because a really stupid narrative that goes around is that Bill Russell had a height advantage over everybody. It's not true. He was an average heighted center for his time. I think people get it twisted when they think of they mix Wilt and him together, because Wilt Chamberlain would be above average for any era to this day. But Bill Russell was 6'10", and he even wrote in his book in the middle of the 60s, "I'm average as far as centers go." Now, was he average athletically? Absolutely not. But size-wise, he didn't have this crazy advantage that people think he had. I don't know where that narrative came from. But the next year, 59 wins. Obviously, their most at that point in time. And then, Malik, I was going to throw it to you because this is the year that Wilt comes in the league. So if you have anything on Wilt and Bill's relationship or something, I'd say we should get into that now.
I'd rather y'all go through. I'd rather y'all go through the 8-year this period, and we'll get into Wilt and
Okay.
Bill and Wilt after.
Same. Okay. 19's the second title of the 8. Wilt's in the league. They play him in the Eastern Finals. Obviously, the Celtics get the 1 seed, so they get the bye, and beat him 4-2. And I heard this is only from reading Wilt's biography, actually, that Tommy Heinsohn had a game-winning tip in Game 6 to seal the series. So shout out to Tommy Heinsohn, the late great Tommy, putting him in the finals, and then going 7 games with the St. Louis Hawks. That was their first nemesis, really, the St. Louis Hawks in these early years, with Bob Pettit, Cliff Hagan. You got anything on that, Hoops? 7 games that year, 1960.
Nothing really to note about the 1960 finals. I know that their 57 matchup in Bill's rookie year was like supposedly the greatest Game 7 of any finals ever that we don't have on film. It went to 3 overtimes and ended with like some incredible play.
Yeah, he said that Frank Ramsey was really big. It went to 1 overtime or 2 overtimes. That was, I think, Dr. Hawk, if you can get on the microphone, I bet you know. But yeah, that sucks that we don't have footage of that first finals, because he speaks about that, how he got a big block towards the end of regulation and everything. But you know what's interesting is we don't really talk about how close that St. Louis Hawks team was to winning so many rings. I think one thing that really kills Bill Russell's legacy is we act like he didn't beat anybody because we don't talk about the other teams with such.
No, that is true. Yeah, that is definitely
we act
true.
like because they won 8 in a row, they weren't playing anybody, but these series were all close. I mean, the guy's 10-0 in Game 7s, and this St. Louis Hawks team gave them problems. You know, Bob Pettit is a really, really great player that we just sadly have very little knowledge of because there's not one full broadcast of him playing basketball, which sucks because he's dropping 50 in the finals. But yeah, that's what I got on the 60 season. 60-61, I think, was actually probably their least amount of games they played in a playoffs that year. Won both series in 5. You got anything on that, Hoops? And then I want to throw it to Dr. Hawk because he stepped on.
The 61 playoffs, it was kind of like the showing of basically we're the greatest basketball dynasty ever. We're better than Mike Lakers.
I think he may have gone cut off there, huh?
Oh, did I cut out?
Keep going.
But in 61, the Hawks and Lakers kind of have like a showdown to see who will battle the Celtics in the finals. And I think it was that year, and they go to 7 games. Pettit and Hagan pull it out over a rookie West and Elgin Baylor. And then they get to the finals and just get annihilated by the Celtics. It is, to this day, the greatest playoff net rating for a single team in the postseason. Granted, they only played 2 rounds, so it's not the same as like a full 4-round best of 7 game totality. but like the overall like gap in point differentials in the games, both against the Nationals in the first round and then in the finals against the Hawks, they just annihilated them.
Doc, you got anything? How we doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you guys?
We're doing all right, hanging in there.
All right, good. I think he's spot on. The first series, or the series against the Lakers, that wasn't even really a contest. You know, St. Louis. Back with you, I heard you guys talking earlier, and when everybody brings up St. Louis, they talk about the 50-point game with Bob Pettit. The year that they pulled it out, and even in the year prior. I mean, Bob was a great player. He's underrated as a power forward. However, the dark horse for the Hawks, and I've said it 1,000 times in our chats, is a guy named Cliff Hagan. Cliff Hagan, particularly in the year they won, he had a couple of games where he hit 30 or 33 points, and he just doesn't get the credit. He's sort of overshadowed by Hagan. And even in some instances in that era, he's overshadowed by Clyde, Big Clyde Lovellette. So that's one player that you'll keep. That's one name that you'll keep hearing come up when you're talking about the Hawks. So I'll turn it back over to you guys. We can keep rolling.
Thanks, Doc. That's great knowledge, by the way. Definitely shoot Dr. Hawk a follow. He knows so much, like it's crazy. But 1962, guys.
Before we get to 62,
my bad.
I wanted to quickly come in because in 1961, there was an exhibition game in Lexington, Kentucky.
Yes.
And when Sam Jones went to the lobby to get some food, he was refused service. So later they met with Bill Russell, Casey Jones. After Sam told him what happened, Russell suggested that none of the black players should participate in the game and informed the Celtics, really Red Auerbach, and the game would be called off after two more players from St. Louis joined the protests. So back in 61, you had Bill in the center of a canceled game and in the midst of these championship years. So I just want to add that since that happened in this time frame.
Yeah, shout out to Bill for speaking up for what he believed in at that time and going home against the status quo. You want me to get into 62? This is my favorite one.
Go ahead.
62. So a lot of people in my era, my generation, they look at the 2015-16 NBA season as one of the most iconic. You had Kobe retiring. You had Tim Duncan retiring. You had the Warriors getting 73 wins. You had them blowing a 3-1 lead in the finals. You had Steph Curry's unanimous MVP season, 73 wins. But this 62 season is right up there in terms of the iconic things that happened. I mean, in terms of stats, it's just like on steroids. Oscar Robertson's triple-double, Wilt Chamberlain's 50 points a game, Bill won MVP with 19 points, 23 rebounds, Elgin Baylor putting up some ridiculous numbers, and the Celtics meet the Warriors in a little rematch in 1960, and this one goes the distance, 7 games, and it comes down to a game winner, Sam Jones. I made actually the longest Sam Jones highlight reel on the internet. If you guys go to my YouTube channel, you check it out. And the game winner's in there. He hit the first game winner that you can see on film in a Game 7 and wins the series for the Celtics over the Warriors. And that's just iconic. And then the next, Hoops, you want to get into it, that Lakers series, because that one's crazy. I mean, this year, for them to win this 4th title in a row is like, they could have easily lost, like very easily lost.
Real quick on that series with Wilt, everyone talks about the 50 point per game average in the regular season. And when he played against the Celtics and Russell, his average dipped from 50 to 34 points per game, which I'd assume is probably the largest drop for any superstar going into a playoff series, not including like injuries, of course. And it's just a testament to the defense of the Celtics, because when you're taking that much offensive value away from a team, you're basically making it like a slugfest to the very end. As far as the series with the Lakers go, the Lakers that year were an all-time team when Elgin was playing. When he was on the court, they had basically up until that point the greatest non-Celtics team of all time. because you got to remember he was serving in the military at the time, so he missed a bunch of games that season. But he was averaging 38 points per game when he was in. And honestly, Dime, you should probably go into the details of the series. And I know that the Game 7 was really crazy.
Well, before I do that, Doc, do you have anything on the Warriors series or the 62 finals before we get into the whole Game 7 Frank Selvey situation?
Oh, I have a whole lot on the 62 finals.
Go for it.
So I'll let you guys keep rolling. So go ahead.
Nothing on the Warriors series? I mean,
Not a whole lot really, other than the Sam Jones shot. I mean, I've written articles about Sam, so I don't have anything that I would stand out and spend any time on. So
one thing that's interesting, Hoops, is I was reading that guy Wilt Stats on Twitter here that posts those old newspaper clippings. I remember he posted an article before the season, and it said that Frank McGuire, the coach of the Philadelphia Warriors, was like, this year it's going to be not just Wilt shooting a ton. It's going to be everybody getting involved. And that's just absolutely not what happened. And then in the playoffs, apparently it was like, now it's time for Wilt to get everybody involved or something. I don't know if I read that in the book or in a newspaper, but you could clearly tell that Wilt moved the ball more. And I honestly think that's part of why the series was so close, that he did actually. I think that the thing to point to the Celtic defense that you're talking about, I'd say less than the points is more the efficiency that dropped from him. He shot 47%, which is still pretty good, but relative to Wilt, not so great. But I mean, 33 and 27. Then you had Paul Arizin averaging 20 and Tom Meschery averaging 21 in the series. So I think they honestly was probably a better balance for them, and that's part of why they got so close. But in the finals, yeah, I mean, 2-2 series. You have Jerry West who had a game winner, and I think it was game 3, stealing the ball and laying it in.
yes.
And then you have the iconic Game 5 with the series tied at 2 at Boston Garden. To this day, a still record. Elgin Baylor, 61 points. To take a 3-2 lead going back to L.A. Anything on that?
Well, that was one that they played at the LA Sports Arena, and everyone thought that they were gonna close out. I mean,
This is Game 6 you're talking about, right?
Game 6 we're talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they played at the Sports Arena. Everybody thought they were going to close it out. And they're like, "Here's the opportunity," and it didn't happen. It was back in the day. I couldn't name the celebrities if I tried, but they had their little front row celebrity thing, like sort of like the forum they would have at the forum later, but it just didn't work out. In that game, Boston came to play. I think Boston won 3 out of the 4 quarters. They outscored them. You know, they didn't. Boston came to do business. I mean, Bill Russell showed up big time. 24 rebounds, I believe he had in that game. West and Baylor, I think, had over 30 each, but they just didn't get it done. They didn't get the help from there. I think after they each had over 30, I think Frank Selvey may have gotten double figures, and I think that was it.
Doc, this is actually the way I'm looking at the stats right now, and the way you're like having this down to a T is like nuts. Like I'm gonna read it. Except the only thing that was off was the Celtics outscored them in 2 quarters. Lakers outscored them in 2, but so the Lakers actually a really great video about this game. It's in my playlist of the 60s playlist that I put on my YouTube channel that you guys can all go check out. If you go to my YouTube channel, go to playlist. It's in order, but it's Chick Hearn, Red Auerbach, Tommy Heinsohn, I believe Hot Rod Hundley, and Elgin sitting there and talking about this game. And I think Frank Selvey's there as well. And he was talking about how the Lakers had a lead. I mean, it says at halftime they were up 65 to 57. So they had an 8-point lead. And then the Celtics outscored them in the third quarter, 34-16. And from what I heard Sam Jones started just that seems to be a common theme. Every time the Celtics are about to lose, Sam Jones just does something.
Jones did.
Yeah, so the stat lines you were talking about, Bill Russell, 9, and they basically admitted that the moment just got to them. Like that's what they said on the show. So you guys can check it out. But Bill Russell, 19 points, 24 rebounds. So just like you said, 10 assists in 48 minutes, and he shot 70% from the line. That needs to be talked about more this game. And then you were right about Jerry and Elgin, 34 points apiece. Jerry shot 63%, Elgin shot 41, and then Frank Selvey was their only other guy in double figures with 13.
Yeah.
Jay?
Yeah, if I recall correctly, I think Sam Jones was Bill's teammate on those U of San Francisco teams, right?
No, that's KC.
Casey Jones.
Casey Jones. Casey Jones. Okay, okay. I always get those two Jones guys mixed up. But the thing about, because I've heard Bill talk about his interesting relationship with Sam Jones, and that Sam Jones could have, or this, I may be talking about Casey Jones, but one of them had the ability to like lead the league in scoring, and Bill felt could be just as good as Elgin Baylor or Jerry West.
That's
But
Sam.
that's Sam. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's just not how Sam was wired.
Right.
Sam wanted to turn it on when he felt like turning it on, and it would drive Bill nuts. And the other thing that's really not talked about is that not only was Bill a superior athlete, but Bill had a photographic memory. And you know how when people interview Bron, they ask, "Hey, in the second quarter, with 7 minutes left, what were you think on this play?" And Bron can kind of tell you where all 10 guys were on the floor, where the refs were, who was eating popcorn in the first row, what what I'm saying, what team was supposed to be running what, and Bill kind of had that same thing, where you could ask Bill about a game 10, 15 years ago, and he could walk you play by play throughout that whole game because that's how his brain was wired. And I think that helped Bill a lot too, not necessarily from film study, but the experience of playing an opponent, knowing what an opponent liked to do, didn't like to do. Um, because again, there were just certain things that he did that weren't taught, weren't thought of as quote unquote basketball plays or basketball fundamentals. Like he constantly tried to, and this contributed to his rebounds. He never tried to power swat a ball into the fifth row. He always would try to tip the ball up and then second jump and get the rebound or tip it to a teammate. And you see those little things when you watch Bill play that his peers either can't do or they don't think to do. And so he's this weird Voltron of like athletically superior. I wouldn't say it's like Bron compared to his peers, but it's close. But his mind for the game, his instincts for the game, and his competitive fire is just Bill's just like this one of a kind guy. That absolutely deserves all this flowers.
Absolutely. The competitive fire is really what sticks out to me when you listen to him talk. But Doc, you want to take away the famous Game 7 at the Boston Garden 62 Finals? There actually is some footage on this game. It's in
Oh
the
yeah.
playlist.
So it's two things for me, and I'll let everybody speak. There's two things for me that stood out from Game 7. I read about this was before I was born, but this was when I read about it as a kid. First is I never forget the announcer at the end of the game. He said whatever he was saying. Then he goes and says, Bill Russell, he says 30 points and 40. And he says this quote, I repeat, 40, just like that, 40 rebounds.
That's a classic clip.
That's a classic clip. The other thing was Elgin Baylor, as usual, played his heart out. He got 41 points in that game. And the reason I remember he got 41 is because he fouled out. And when he fouled out, even though he had been whipping Boston's ass, for lack of a better term, they gave him a standing ovation. So those are the two things that I remember most, other than the game itself, was that those two guys performed and played their butts off. Quick excerpt though about Sam Jones before I turn it over to Dime and whomever else wants to speak. Sam Jones, if we go through their dynasty, you're gonna hear, oh, Sam Jones hit the game winner. He hit the game winner. I think they documented maybe like 9 or 10 times in playoff games, not always championship games, that he hit game winners. Usually that bank shot of his. But when he first came from North Carolina A&T to Boston, they used to have to get on him to shoot. And so Bill Russell used to tease him because he wouldn't shoot in the games because he was intimidated by the crowd. And so his nickname was Right Back. And somebody said, "Well, why is his nickname Right Back?" Well, Sam Jones, they called him Right Back because it meant right back at you. Because if you were in Madison Square Garden or someplace where there were 20,000 people instead of 5,000 like he was used to playing in front of, you passing the ball, he was going to pass it right back. He did, but with some prodding and some encouragement, all of a sudden he turns into this magnificent clutch player and perennial all-star. So that's what I wanted to say about that. But I'll let you guys go ahead.
Oh, good stuff, Doc. Hoops.
Can we move on to 63 soon, guys? I just
Oh,
wanted
for
to
sure, for
move
sure.
us
I was gonna
along.
go to hoops. I was gonna finish it, but hoops. You got anything?
Oh, I was just gonna say he brought his free throw percentage up from 59% to 72 in that series, and in that final game, he shot 14 of 17, which is 82% from the free throw line. He's the only member of his team who shot over 40% from the field in that game. So he was basically carrying so ridiculously, 40 rebounds.
And he played every minute of the game, 53 minutes. It's actually unbelievable. But this is how it ended. So game 7, guys, you can see this. It's on the Lakers Celtics 30 for 30. You can see it in the YouTube. But there was a pretty even game the whole way. Celtics were up by like 4 or 6 points towards the end, and Frank Selvey, who was an All-Star once or twice in the backcourt with Jerry, had a couple of buckets to tie the game, and Bob Cousy, with the last chance to win the game, turned the ball over on a cross-court pass. Oh, I'm sorry, actually. No, Tommy Heinsohn or Frank Ramsey, one of them threw up a ridiculous shot with time remaining on the clock. And the Lakers took a timeout, tied it, I think, like 100-100. And it was a great, like, misdirection of a play. Frank Selvey, wide open. He was the inbounder, give and go. You know, they always say the inbounder is the most dangerous player. Wide open left wing jump shot, right on line, just short. Game goes to overtime. The Celtics are at home. The momentum, as Doc said, Elgin gets fouled out, and they ride it home. But if Frank Selvey makes that shot, I mean, the whole history of basketball could have been changed right there. And it just tells you how close. You got a game winner in Game 7 in the Wilt series, and then you have now a potential game winner missed in the 7th game of this series, just how close they were to losing. But now they're, what, four chips in a row now, Malika?
This should be, I'm thinking, 59, 60, 61, 62. This is the 4th. Hawk,
Yeah.
you're on. Hawk, you're not on mute. Is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I think you guys pretty much said it all. I mean, those are the things that stood out for me.
Well, 63, so I read in the book, Bill said that going into the year after that Game 7, and this is this is what I'm talking about, when you got to really, the way I've been able to do this year in, year out, you really see the patterns and like the continuity from season to season. Bill said that everyone thought that after that Game 7, the Lakers with Jerry and Elgin, Jerry's now in his 3rd year, Elgin's in his 5th year, and Bob Cousy's announced he's going to retire after the season or whatever, and people thought Lakers going to get them this year. Go to the same thing, 58 wins, 1st seed. Go to Game 7 against the Cincinnati Royals, Oscar Robertson and crew. And I think they were a little unexpected for that. And then, of course, in typical Sam Jones fashion, Game 7, 47 points on 67% shooting to get them into the finals. They rematched the Lakers. And this is where the first full game comes in. For anybody that's actually curious enough to watch the full games, the final game, Game 6 at the Sports Arena, Bob Cousy's final game is on video, and the Celtics do it again and send Cousy out a winner. But if anybody's got any thoughts on that season, go for it. Now that's what, 5 rings in a row?
That's 5 rings in a row. But before we go there, we're going to have a civil rights break. This is not really a break. This is a big
Go for
one
it.
because as we remember, Medgar Evers. It's unfortunate, but Medgar Evers was buried. Of course, he was assassinated on June 12th, 1963, and and Bill Russell, he had a relationship with Medgar Evers, and just days after Evers was slain, Russell reached out to his brother, who was Charles Evers, and he wanted to know how he could help. And his brother wanted him to organize an integrated basketball camp. So Bill Russell pulled one together. And this was in Jackson, Mississippi. Now let's set the stage here. Like, we're talking about 1963. The Ku Klux Klan were literally right across the street. And Bill Russell pulled this camp together. So this camp was going on with this integrated basketball camp with the Ku Klux Klan right across the street. And this is a type of pressure. So he's winning championships. And he's also organizing integrated basketball camps for the youth with the Ku Klux Klan right across the street standing guard. This is who we're talking about here. So, yes, I just wanted to make sure we share that, yes, he was a basketball great icon, one of the GOATs all time. But he was also, when it comes to civil rights and we talk about today, like off the court, Bill Russell, there was no match. There really wasn't any match.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Jada
Go
Wakanda?
for it, Jay.
1964 is also the year I believe the Celtics roll out the first all black starting five lineup
Are you
in
sure that
NBA
wasn't? I
history.
think that may have been the next season, though, right? Early in the next season.
I thought that was 64. Let me
Was it
see.
the year 64, but in the 64-65 season? Which season was it?
Doc, you
I,
know
bel
that when they first started, all five of them.
I
I
think it
believe
was
it was.
64 season. I can't recall. I should know this. I just read about this the other day. So I can
Well,
find
I
it.
believe it
regardless,
was
if it was
60.
either, what you say, hoops?
I believe it was 64. Heinsohn got an injury. He was originally the fifth starter, and when he got injured, I can't remember if it was Knowles that they put in.
It's
It
Knowles.
was. It
It's
was
Knowles.
Willie False.
But yeah, so either it's the 63, 64. I know it's in 1964. I'm just not sure if it was early 64, 65 season or 63, 64. But yeah, that's a big milestone. And one thing about the basketball camps thing, the one quote that always sticks out to me is when the reporter asked him if he's, you think black kids are going to play with white kids. And he said, my kids play with white kids. Ain't nobody got hurt yet. I don't know why, but that always stuck to me. When he
It's
said,
a serious, and I wish we could put up like a video and people could see it like live. I'm gonna pull the video and put it up on a jumbotron because it was just like the serious, like his demeanor in which how he said it. Also, it wasn't just a quote.
yeah,
It's
Yeah.
really
it's
his
just like it's not
demeanor.
a big deal. Like doesn't matter what they look different. Like that's it. They're playing. Their kids playing. But that 64 season, same thing. Basically 59-21, another first seed. And one thing you wonder, how are these guys just the first seed every single year? How can they do this? Russell said in his book that Red makes sure he like runs them to the ground before the season. So like by the time the season begins, they're like in mid-season form physically. Well, everyone else is trying to like you know, gain their legs back. And that year, they actually had an easier time in the playoffs. But the funny part is, going into the season, Bill said in the book that with Kuzi gone, people were really writing them off. Like that Oscars Royals had just taken him to 7. Now Jerry Lucas is coming in from Ohio State, and he's one of the best college players at the time ever. And still, and that's when Casey Jones got inserted into the starting lineup, and they really like became a shutdown defensive team even more than they were. And they beat the Royals 4-1, and then in the finals they played against the San Francisco Warriors, who had Wilt. But at that time, I think the Warriors kind of overachieved that year. They took such a big leap forward that they weren't expected to win that series at that point. And the Celtics beat them 4-1, and that's 6 rings in a row now. Anything on that, guys?
San Francisco didn't have a shot. So, it was a lot of hype and ballyhoo because Wilt was out west and they had made it to the finals. I think they had gone, if I'm correct, I think they went to a game 7 in the West, possibly, to the best of my recollection. But no,
They
they didn't.
did, yeah, against St. Louis, they did.
Yeah, against St. Louis. They won one game. But it was a very physical series. One of the things that happened though, Tommy Heinsohn, and this was just Nate Thurman early on. Tommy Heinsohn had and him and I believe Frank Ramsey, they had Nate Thurman kind of psyched out because they didn't trust his outside shooting. So at one point, every time he would go up for a jumper, I think it's happened from the second game on, they would yell, "Too late," and meaning we're already going to the other end. I'm not even guarding you. I'm heading down for the fast break. So if you made it, great. But if you missed it, he was already at the other end for a layup. So it's just mind games.
Wow. Yeah, Nate Thurman shot 32%, 33% in that series, which is pretty rough for him.
Yeah,
Nate
too.
Thurman was someone also, in my opinion, that's also underrated and not given kudos or talked about
Extremely,
nearly
extremely.
enough.
Most
Nearly
definitely.
enough.
Most definitely.
Any star that's not named Jerry, Oscar, Wilt, and Bill from that era, and yeah, those guys are pretty underrated to me. But 65 is where Russell said that was his in the book. He said that was his favorite team. He said they were the best that year. He had Hondo in year 3. You had Casey Jones now his second year in the starting lineup, and he says he likes that. That's the team that he would take. 62 wins. They're the first 60-win team in the history of the league, if I'm not mistaken. 62-18. This is when Wilt gets traded back to. And by the way, we casually skipped over the fact that this man won 3 MVPs in a row, from 60 to one season to the 63 season. But 65, yeah, same thing. Again, first in defensive rating, first in pace. This is the year that Wilt got traded back to Philly. So that series is ended by a very famous call, Game 7. Havlicek steals the ball, and that was when Russell really, like, if he had lost that series, let's say they got it to Hal Greer or somebody and the Sixers won, he would have been the scapegoat, because he threw the ball off the stanchion thing before the steal.
Absolutely.
But but yeah, and then in the finals that year, that was basically the finals, because Elgin Baylor had gone. That's when his knee got just like torn to shreds. So it was just Jerry West and a couple of solid players, but Jerry West was like dragging them, and they won one game because Jerry's just that good. But that was the 7th title in a row. Hoops, you got anything? Anybody got anything from 65?
On 64, I don't mean to backtrack, but I did want to add
Go for it.
that to this day is the greatest defensive rating for a single season relative to the league. That's basically the greatest defense of all time, is the 64 team, according to the numbers. And that would be, I think, his 8th consecutive number 1 defense in the league. And then obviously they did it again in 65. But basically the reason it was even more dominant than the years before was Cousy retired, and they were like, hey, let's just double down on defense. And they had Satch Sanders and Casey Jones just like suffocating people.
And I think I love to give Russell praise for being the leader of this team and being the best player on most of these teams, but I don't want to downplay supporting cast. I feel like they don't get enough love. Sometimes they get, depending on who you're talking to, sometimes they overrate it, sometimes they underrate it. But the clutchness of some of these players, Hondo and Sam specifically, just the big plays that they would make. It's just incredible how year in, year out, they're the ones that make the clutch plays. Like the Celtics just always find a way somehow. That's the most incredible thing to me. All these game 7s, and they always find a way somehow. But the 66 one of the 8-year run is my personal favorite, because they weren't the number 1 seed for the first time. So they didn't get the whole first round bye thing. They had to play against uh, the Royals in the first round. And Game 4 of this series, second half, the full thing on a telecast is on YouTube. It's awesome. And then Game 5, they made like a little mini movie out of it, so you can actually see how that series ends. And they're down 2-1, guys. Like they're on the verge of losing this series to the Royals, and they won 2 straight games with their backs against the wall. And it's just that typical Sam making big shots, Bill making big defensive plays. You can see it. I mean, it's just every time their backs are against the wall. And then they go to the conference or division final, and the Sixers were the number 1 seed, and they beat them 4-1. And then in the finals, beat the Lakers in the 7th game. But that one, they had to win 3 rounds, and they did it. It didn't matter. After 7 years of going deep in the playoffs and winning the title, to do that is just, it's just unbelievable. But anybody got anything on 66?
Man, 66 was basically Russell just saying, like, I'm not giving up my streak yet. It's not going to be over yet, because you had Oscar and the Royals, then you had Wilt Sixers, and then Jerry West and Elgin's Lakers, and just none of them could match up to Russell's Celtics despite already winning 7 straight. It's just ridiculous.
Um. Okay, go ahead. You guys finished talking about the 66 finals?
That's the 8-year run right there, 8 in a row.
All right, cool. Thanks, guys, for taking us down that history, that detailed history, as only you guys could do it. And you guys were so exuberant and had so much fun talking about it. We get to 66, and 66 is when Red Auerbach retired, and he wanted a player, or one of his former players to be, or a player to be also the coach, wanted to be the head coach. First, he wanted it to be Frank Ramsey, but that didn't work out because Frank Ramsey was making money for some nursing homes. His second choice was Kuzi, who didn't want to coach his former teammates. Tom Heinsohn. He didn't want to. He did not think he could handle the surly Russell. So Russell was the fourth choice as head coach, and he was the first black coach ever in the league. And he was a player coach. So historic thing for the NBA and especially for black players in the league moving forward. But he was the fourth choice, and that's something I didn't know until I researched that.
First black coach in any North American major sport. That's football, baseball, hockey, basketball. First and all of that.
Insane. And Red was trying not to hire him, but he had to give it to him at the end of the day. Is there anything you guys want to say on this?
Well, I just think it's incredible that Red, I know obviously it wasn't his first choice, but to succeed power in that time to a black man is amazing, and I think it set the tone for the future. And not winning that first year after winning 8 straight, I know it was an easy way for people to criticize Russell that this is too big of a role for him, but in typical Bill Russell fashion, responding to very few defeats that he had, he responds. So that 67 Sixers team is just ridiculous. Like everything just peaked for them that year. You got Wilt in his prime. You have Hal Greer, Chet Walker, Billy Cunningham coming off the bench, Alex Hannum as coach, 67-14. Like, you got to lose eventually, right?
Yeah. Does anybody have any stories or anecdotes about teammates not wanting to let Bill Russell down in these games? Because it just seems to me that his leadership style, his character style, like his teammates just didn't want to let him down.
Well, I think also, Doc can maybe have more on this, but it feels like to me the way Russell talks about. Oh, are you talking about when he's a coach?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, honestly, I don't know. Doc, you got anything on that?
No, I think that was always the case with Russ. Period. Even and when that first year when he became the coach, it was a transition. He was dealing with that from going from being the coach, from going from someone who was on the sidelines and having to chastise certain folks and what have you, particularly like Satch, finding Satch Sanders finding a right role for him, and so it wasn't a smooth transition, but I think that same mentality was always there. I think it grew and there was more pressure. I'm not going to go into the second year yet, but there was a lot more pressure the second year because as Malika stated, here you are, the African American coach, the first one. You have the streak. Oh, and now even though you're going up against a juggernaut Philly squad, you lost. Tremendous pressure there. So I think but back to what you were saying, I think it was always there that they wanted to win, and now the pressure was building. So
Now, what do we want to say about this player coach reign of Bill Russell from 66 to 69? Before we get to, the series also that he played against Wilt and how pissed he was in that series about he felt how Wilt level of play in that series. What do we want to talk about during this time period?
Well, I think I want to paint the picture that some of my fellow older Celtics fans have painted for me, and that's that he had like no assistant coach. Like apparently he would have Hondo help him with subs or something. Like you basically had nobody to go to. He has to make the decisions while he's playing, which is just ridiculous to think about now. Is that correct, Doc?
that is and that was one of the first things that came out. They would the media would question his substitutions the entire year. They're like, "Oh, he did a great job. They made the playoffs, blah blah blah." But we don't know about his substitutions and his play calling. There were times when he forgot to sub guys out. That was KC's last year. There were times when he forgot to sub him out. There was another time when he forgot to bring KC back in a crucial moment when somebody was torching him. So things like that happened. It was a transition.
And in this next season, the 67-68 season, you got people thinking that those Sixers may start their dynasty. Wilt they won this amazing ring. They have this great team, a lot of guys in their primes. Billy Cunningham is young and getting better. And I know, well, Russell said, I don't remember where I read it, but he said that it really pissed him off that people were calling, just not, to hear somebody else be called the world champions all year, like really made him angry. And that's the first year where you have best of 7 in every round. So when people say, the shorter schedule, whatever, he had to win 3 rounds, best of 7 this year. The only difference with today's playoffs is you have an extra round in the first round. And they played the Detroit Pistons, Dave Bing and Dave DeBusschere in that first series, 1-6. And then the epic series against the Sixers, the rematch. And the Sixers are up 3-1. And then you have the first ever 3-1 collapse in the history of basketball, with 2 home games being lost in Philly at the Spectrum. Doc, Hoops, you got anything on that? Because that one is just, I know, one that the Sixers would like to have back for sure.
I'd just say that Wilt was definitely wearing on his teammates. I was reading King of the Court earlier, and I wrote down this excerpt about the '68 season regarding the Philly team, and it said, Wilt annoyed teammates by constantly glaring at referees and players. Before the second half, he ignored the team huddle, grabbed a stat sheet from the scorer's table, and studied it with his friends. So, Wilt was literally, going and looking at his assist numbers during the game, during timeouts when they're supposed to be talking strategy, which I think it just exemplifies the difference between him and Russell as leaders.
What's interesting in that series that's very controversial, and Doc can probably shed some light on it, is the lack of shot attempts being taken in Game 7 by Wilt. That was really talked about, and that was that he only shot 2 shots in the second half, and they were tip attempts. That lack of aggression he got really criticized for. Celtics won it 100-96, and I also know that Russ made an adjustment of putting himself on Chet Walker and putting Wayne Embry, who had just been picked up, on Wilt. Yeah. Because he knew that Wilt was not 100%, so he knew that he wouldn't be as aggressive. I don't think he anticipated him to not shoot like that, but he went with something a little different, and it ended up paying dividends. And that's something that I think when we talk about Bill Russell as the coach making strategic decisions, I think that one may be the crowning moment right there with the Wayne Embry call, because he was not getting that. This is not the Wayne Embry from the Royals. So, you got anything on that, Doc, on this series? Because we've talked about it a lot.
Yeah, Embry was a big source for them, and I tell you what was going on in the locker room when they were down 3-1. Him and Hondo called a players meeting. It wasn't players only because Russ was there, and they called everybody in the locker room. And Wayne Embry, you got to remember, he hadn't won a ring yet, but this was going to be his last, next to last go round before he went to Milwaukee in expansion for a year, and they just wrote the word pride on the wall, on the chalkboard, and they say, we got to do it, we got to get this done. The Philly chants have been chanting Boston's dead, and from that point they turned it around. You hit spot on with the defensive switch. That was huge. I will say, we've said it 10,000 times in chats, injuries did play a role in this for Philly, but it wasn't the injuries. That wasn't the reason why Boston won. Boston took it from them and outplayed them. But Philly was doomed from Christmas on. And I'm going to tell you why, in my opinion. Wilt reverted back to the Wilt that came from San Francisco. When Wilt first came from San Francisco in 65, they went to the playoffs and they went to the 7th game. But he didn't get along with everybody, particularly with the old Philly guys that played with the old Syracuse franchise. Him and Hal Greer and what have you. They didn't get along. Wilt would skip practices, Wilt was disrespectful to Dolph Shays. And so as he gradually got his stuff together and Alex Hannum came in and they won it, I think Wilt also got a little comfortable. And then by December, Hannum, the coach, was already thinking about going westward. And Chamberlain was already thinking about going westward to another franchise if he did not get part ownership in the team. And he was distracted, and he was also fixated on becoming the assist leader. And so, hence, that's why he's looking at stat sheets. Because at that point, he's not looking to see how many rebounds he got and if he scored 50, because he wasn't scoring 50. It was the assists. All of that lack of focus, and the fact that you're going against a focused Boston Celtic team, that resulted in the ass whipping that they took.
And that's the year that he actually led the league in assists, right?
Yes, it is.
So that can definitely be a contributing factor to his passiveness. Because like even if you're too injured to like back guys all the way down, and you obviously have the offensive fouls rules that are very harsh. But that at the very least, man, you got that turnaround bank shot that's unblockable. I mean, I'd hope that he would take that shot, but it didn't materialize. I also want to say in Game 5, the Celtics were only up by 3 points going into the fourth and in the Spectrum, and they outscored the Sixers 38-23 in the fourth quarter. And Sam Jones, typical, 37 points when it matters most. I mean, it's almost laughable. But Jay, what you got?
Nah, that series, Game 7, Wilt only takes 9 uh, attempts from the field, but he does shoot 15 free throws. But I get that that's not the Wilt that was trying to put 30 or 40 up a game, whether that's due to injuries or distractions or whatever. It's just super weird that a guy who played 48 minutes and grabbed 34 total rebounds, he did that while distracted. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's insane.
It's just I guess there's got to be a little bit of frustration when you look at the. I know he did. Yeah, you're right. He did shoot 6 for 15 from the line, so like it's below his average even for him. But and that's probably part of the reason why he got less shots is because they fouled him. But Matt Guokas, Luke Jackson, Wally Jones, Chet Walker, Hal Greer, every single one of these players took more shots than him in this game. And I mean, as a fan, if I'm a Sixers fan, even though this is not the Wilt that shoots 30 shots a night, I want him being more aggressive in this game. But yeah, that's how that series went. And then they played the Lakers, and the Lakers still didn't really have a star big man. Celtics won in 6. I think that Sixers series was really the finals for them. And they got that title, and that's when Bill got his title as a player coach. So that was a huge one for him. I think they asked him last year which one was the sweetest, and he said that one, which is I thought it would be maybe 69, but what do you want to do, Malika? You want to get to that last year? This is my favorite
Let's
one.
talk about that last series
This
because
is my favorite one right here.
Yeah, that last series was something else because this brought on the feud that lasted for a while. So yeah, let's get into that.
Well, Wilt goes to the Lakers, as everybody knows, gets traded for Archie Clark and Darryl Imhoff. And what, Jerry Chambers involved in that deal, Doc?
I think so. I can
But the
remember.
main ones are Archie Clark and Darryl Imhoff.
The main one, in my opinion, is Archie. That could have made a difference.
You got anything, Jay?
Yeah. The last thing I'll say about that 67-68 season is that Martin Luther King gets assassinated during those playoffs.
Oh, we should have talked about that.
And
that was a big deal in the first game.
Yeah, that was a huge deal. They were actually thinking of some players want to go as far as to just stop the season. And then some want to like take the game off or push it back a couple of days. And that was a huge deal in '68 during that playoff series. Is the assassination of Martin Luther King.
Yeah, that should have been one of those Malika interruptions. But yeah, thanks for while they were in the flow. Here I come with some civil rights information.
Go for it. No, go for it.
It was
we got to
huge.
talk about this. They had a meeting about whether they
And
should play the game or not.
You kept up the tradition, Jay. So thank you. That was the biggest one I should have interrupted for. But yeah, that could have been a stoppage to that season into those finals because. Man, that's a whole different room.
I mean, because it literally set the nation on fire. I mean, you had a whole bunch of riots.
Yeah, that's a whole. It did. I can't imagine like what it was like during that time. The heartbreak, the anger, the everything.
Yeah,
because we lost Malcolm X like a few years before. Like, that was
And then Robert Kennedy, dies that summer.
Right on the
hill.
Robert
Kennedy. Yeah. This, guys, just think about this. We're talking about Bill Russell. When we talk about Bill Russell, and I know when we talk about greats, we get into those silos where we talk about, the game, he only had so many teams. What I love about when Dime and Hawk hoops and, talk about the game. They talk about the game and the era in which it was played, and they talk about the game with knowledge and understanding of how the game was, and with respect. And I love that. But you also have to remember the times these players were living in, like, and what these players were facing. Like, so in terms of, and one day I'm going to do a room when you look at these times and Bill Russell versus the two superstars in the league, Bill Russell versus how Wilt Chamberlain handled those times. They were different.
You could write a thesis on that.
You can
You
write a
could write
thesis
a
on that.
thesis. Now, I will tell you
Yes.
this without saying too much, and I'll say this real quick. I have a piece coming out on the Hub. It may come out this week or it may come out early next week because I'm not submitting it probably until Friday. I will let you know. We talk about a little bit of that. I don't go too much into it right now because I'm showing deference to Bill and showing him. I did give Malik a copy of an article I wrote last year, and that delves into some of that regarding the relationship between Russ, Bill, and Kareem and how they handle things from a sociological standpoint. And it's very important that people know that, not just people of color. But it's very important that people know and understand the dynamics. And we talk about people saying things and who's going to take people like LeBron out front and you're going to protest or you're going to use your platform. It's different when you're not the guy that's making a lot of money. Russ and those guys back then, they were making 100, 200,000 maybe tops. Those at the top end. A lot of those guys had to work in the off season, and they were making 15, 20, $30,000. And if they spoke against something that the establishment deemed as controversial, you could get banished to the Eastern League. So it was difficult. It took a lot. It took a lot of balls, for lack of a better
It
term.
took a lot of risk,
A
man.
lot of
So
risk.
that's going to be a series that I'm going to have coming up, and I'm going to write about it as well. But it's important that the reason why I was breaking and interrupting, because it's important to know what was going on in life, in addition to the Boston fans defecating on his bed and on his walls while he's out there winning these championships for them. And Bill went through. It's not just talking about Bill as a player. It's talking about Bill as a man, as a civil rights icon, and also as a player. And to me, he set the stage, and he fought for him. Oscar Robertson is another one who brought on, his suit brought free agency. Like, there's so much with history that, you have to really, it deserves its flowers, its respect. So sorry, but let's get into 69 because the competitive Bill was pissed at Wilt at the at the end of 16 at the end of. So let's talk about that.
You got anything, Jay, before we get onto that season? Jay and Hoops?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to put Malika's comments into context, and I'm not sure how NBA contracts were done, but I assume NBA contracts were year to year, right? Or were they signing multi-year deals? Because I know in baseball they were still doing year-to-year contracts in the late '60s, because that's what Koufax and Drysdale were upset about.
They did have a few multi-year contracts by that point.
Okay,
Yeah, because Russell. Actually, I remember what Russell's was because um, he wanted more than Will at one point. I'll go into that in my article as well. But yeah, no, they did have multi-year deals.
okay, and then the second thing I was going to point out is that $150,000 in 1968 is equivalent to like 1.25 million in today's money,
Yeah.
or if you want to be technical, 1,277,000.
Go ahead, brother.
I just wanted to point out we probably just missed it talking about all the basketball side of what was going on in '67. But I feel like we need to talk about the Cleveland Summit as well, because that was such like a crucial point where like you saw black athletes stand together when they were trying to dissuade Muhammad Ali from his stance regarding the draft.
Yes, that's another thing that Malika should have did the
You guys are
whole
probably more qualified to
started
talk about this.
speaking when did the whole beep beep, like, yeah, the Cleveland Summit and Muhammad Ali, like, that was, like when they were trying to send him over trying to send him to fight And yeah, that was for draft dodging. You had Kareem. Like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was asked by Bill Russell to kind of stand up and to be there, and he came, and he was Lou Alcindor still at the time. I think he was at UCLA at the time.
Was.
He was.
Yes.
Yep. And the Cleveland Summit, the famous picture where you have, the black athlete Grace, said OJ was not included in this picture because he did not attend. But but it was, one of the most historic meetings organized by Jim Brown, and pivotal when you think about athletes coming together, and speaking up and fighting for one another and being there for one another. It was one of the most pivotal things that happened during that time. And this is one of the things with Bill Russell, and we can go on and on about this too. But this is the one thing I wanted to pay tribute to Bill Russell for not only being one of the greatest players and giving us all on the court, being the family man at home with his family, his children, but also he stood up for his people at great consequence. Like, he's not a billionaire like or the players like today, but so he did it because it's from the heart. We talked earlier about some of the things that he witnessed his father being called boy. He witnessed his father being disrespected, like on a few occasions. And he demanded respect. He demanded you treat him as a man, and he wanted that for his people. He wanted his people to be judged for who they are, not by the color of their skin. And that's how he lived his life. And he lived his life like that until the end of his life. So it's important to bring these things up. But this is not going to be the last thing Diamond and I talk about Bill Russell. But we felt it was pivotal. We give him his flowers and we talk about him again, just to, for those who may not know as much about Bill Russell, so you understand that he was ferocious on the court in his time, in his era, and he was able to stop one of the greatest players and athletes and players ever with Wilt Chamberlain, who was great. You know what I mean? But we'll get into Wilt Chamberlain at the time too. But it's pivotal we do that. And let's get into '69 because we could be here all night. So,
Well, '69 was obviously the year that Wilt goes to LA, comes here, and this is the old Celtics. Only Hondo and Bill, I believe, were All Stars this year, and they got the last seed in the last playoff seed in the East, the fourth seed. Had to play on the road in every series, beat the 76ers in 5 games, and according to Bob Ryan, weren't favored in that. And then in the final, played against the Knicks. That was a tight series, 1-6, and the Knicks obviously that was the first of many conference finals appearances that would happen. And then you have the famous finals against the Lakers, where they definitely weren't favored. Went down 2-0. Game 4, Sam Jones hits a game-winning shot, and then you get to the Game 7. I mean, where do I start? The balloons. Jack Kent Cook putting the balloons up there, saying that
that was so stupid. That
arrogance.
added
I know.
fuel.
Y'all
That
stupid.
added fuel to the fire. Why do that?
I don't know. Overconfidence, clearly. I don't know. Given the Celtics' track record, I don't know why you would do that. And what was it? Happy Days Are Here Again would be played by the band, and they would interview Elgin, Jerry, and Wilt in that order at center court by Chick. It was just ridiculous. And well, famous Russell quote: "Them Blues gonna stay up there," and they did. I mean, the fact of the matter is, we have the fourth quarter of that game on video, and we have a little bit of archival footage in my playlist of that game. But what we really don't see is that the Celtics turned up on them in the third quarter, and they were up 15 points going into the fourth. So the Lakers won the fourth quarter and made a little run at it. But it's annoying that we can't see how they built up their lead so much. But they did, and then obviously the controversy. I'm gonna let someone else take it at the end. But what's up, Jay?
Yeah, no, that's the game that Wilt caught like a cramp or like lightly rolled his ankle
There we go.
and
Fourth quarter.
won it out, and the coach never put him back in. And again, Wilt wasn't aggressive. He wasn't. He wasn't. Like, it's another 7 of 8 from the field, 13 free throws. In a 2-point loss, he missed 9 free throws.
Yeah,
Um,
tough.
and that's kind of the the big difference between, I guess, Wilt and Russell is not talented teammates. It's the willingness again to do what was necessary for his team to win. And it's tough to say that about Wilt because he did pull down 27 rebounds. You know what I'm saying? So it's one of those things where
And who knows how many block shots? We will never know.
Yeah.
right, right, right. And that's the kind of frustrating thing about Wilt. And uh, what's really interesting is we kind of see a version of Wilt coming to the league with Shaq, where we say the same thing about Shaq is that, yeah, Shaq was dominant, but there's a lot of meat on the bone that Shaq left as far as, what he could have been with his talent and his God-given gifts. And that Celtic mystique just kind of kicks in, and Jerry West has a game for the ages: 42 points, 13 rebounds, 12 assists, uh, 14 of 28 from the field, hits 14 of 18 free throws. Um, but Elgin Baylor is
Yeah.
he's not a shell of himself, but he's not Elgin pre-knee injury either,
Yeah.
and that's the other issue as well, is that Elgin's
It's
playing on a trick knee.
interesting too. Also, the supporting cast. I mean, Keith Erickson 2 for 11, Mel
Yep.
Counts 4 for 13, but Johnny Egan. The reason why I wanted to mention this 3 for 10 is because I actually found a clip in the archival footage that I got from 70s fan. He missed a point blank layup wide open on a fast break. Like not like wide open, but like
Right.
a one that an NBA player, Johnny Egan, should make. And the
Yes.
fact that he missed that, like more than you can rely on. I mean, you know Wilt's gonna miss free throws, but man, you got to be making your layups, and it's crazy because it was only decided by 2. So that's one thing I wanted to throw out there. But yeah, I mean, at the same time, I really one thing about Wilt that I'll never knock is that he wants to play. I'll always like this. It speaks for itself, his resume and durability, but I don't believe that he didn't want to play. I think Russ was harsh on him for that statement that he made that severed the relationship. But obviously, winning that ring against all odds, winning every single series on the road, them and the 95 Rockets are the only teams to do it, is just one of the most impressive rings ever. Everybody counted them out. And that classic, I'm going to put it in the Jumbotron, but that classic interview at the end with Jack Twyman when he's like, can't even get words down. He's just like, I can't say enough about the guys. Oh, man. That always tugs on the heartstrings for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the Heartbreak Lakers. I mean, this series kind of encapsulates the Heartbreak Lakers up until that point when, between Mike and the one ring that Jerry West gets with the Knicks, um, soon to come. But in this era of Celtic dominance, they're the Heartbreak Lakers. They are, and this series kind of just encapsulates that. They go up 2-0. They lose the next 2, and then game 5 they just kind of have, I don't want to say a mental collapse, but it just seems like LeBron biting his fingernails. Like and then game 7 they fall, like Dom said, they fall in the third quarter, but in the fourth quarter they roar back, and Wilt goes out, and it kind of just changes the tone of the game and the energy of the game, and the coach just is furious that Wilt wants to sit down with a cramp and just doesn't put him back in.
But I will
But
I
one
will say
thing,
though on that. Oh my bad, Malika. Go ahead.
no, go ahead, Don.
I was gonna say one thing though about that post injury is the Lakers actually still outscored them. Like they were like I think it was like 12-5 or something after the injury, and they cut it down to 2 points. I don't know if they tied the game or cut it down to 2 points. Doc or Hoops may
They
have that.
they never tied it. They got
Okay, so they were down by 2
within a
points,
point. They got
and they
within a
had many chances to tie it, but they just couldn't get the bucket. And then I think there was a big defensive play. I'm gonna post this thread of the
well
69, but
well
yeah.
Mel Counts actually hit a jumper to put him in the lead, but then he traveled. So they
Right. I remember that.
yeah.
But yeah, Bill made some big defensive plays at the end though. He had like an interception. He had this one where he took the ball from a guy into the basket. Um, It's just, and then obviously the famous play is Don Nelson bounce that made it a 2-possession game. And that time with the hard rim, you don't see that many friendly bounces like that. But
Right.
that was a big one. And then, yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to speak on the how it ended and the post game reaction and everything.
I
Well,
sorry, Malika.
go ahead, Hoops.
Oh, I really just want to point out real quick, like, condolences for Jerry West. He literally averaged 38 points per game in that series, and I feel as though people feel I'm kind of harsh on Wilt and Elgin at times, but like I really cannot cut slack to them for that series. Like, one of them got to step up. If this man's averaging 38, he had 3 games he dropped 40 plus, and he opened the series with a 53-point game, or yeah, 53-point game. The man, I think I think it damaged him mentally for the rest of his life because he felt like that was the one that they should have had, and they were, I think, 0-7 against them at that point in finals.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, 62, 63, 65, 66, or 0-5, I believe. But yeah, I mean I think that's just the way he goes out a winner, the way he came in, and winning the most spectacular ring of them all just kind of says everything about Bill, and his career and how committed he was to winning. And even when you put Wilt and Jerry and Elgin all on the same team, they still got it done. I mean, it's just that one is just amazing. That's one where you're like, for all the people that say like, he always had the better team, and he usually did, but that one you can't say nothing. I mean, they got it done. And obviously the Lakers had their own issues, but even despite the chemistry issues with the coach and Wilt, they still probably should have got this done. And I think they all feel that way. Wilt said, "I still can't believe we lost. It's a mystery to me." I remember that quote. And then Jerry, he can't even talk about it, like, damn near.
And one thing that with their relationship at the end, there was an interview, like Chamberlain's knee, like this is the one thing I always feel bad. Everyone just assumed that he didn't. What if his knee really was injured though? Like,
I definitely think it was. He's limping.
I mean, like, no, really, and like it, like really hurt. Like in today's standard, there's no way. Like if it was injured, he would have went in. I just think that at the time, in the times that people played injured, like you didn't sit out if you became injured and you went back in. Like it was just the way, we're talking about late 69 here. Like, get your ass back in the game, right?
I mean, 15 years later, Kevin McHale plays on a broken foot.
But it was still kind of expected. You said 15 years later. Look where we are now. We're in 2021, right? So with Chamberlain, sometimes I feel like he got the bad end of the stick. But during an interview, after the game, Bill Russell, made some comments that he felt like Chamberlain exaggerated the injury, basically. And they didn't and accused him of copping out of the game, like when it seemed that the Lakers were going to lose. Like he just didn't want to compete because it looked like the Lakers were going to lose. And it pissed Wilt off so much. They didn't talk for 20 years. And they didn't start speaking. I heard different stories of when they started speaking again. I heard they didn't start.
Or 25 years later, when they were doing an interview with Bob Costas. Actually, it was with the commercial they did with Shaq and Bill Walton when Shaq came out and was dunking, and they said you're late, and I can't remember what shoe it was. They had Shaq, they had Bill Russell, they had Kareem, and then they had Bill Walton, and everybody was a little nervous because they had interacted before, but it was like a little head nod, and there was no conversation. And then Bill Walton had said that just Wilt's personality, he went over and broke the ice, and they started talking. But that wasn't the formal apology right there. I think that happened later on. But there was something that Bill
But
said.
who apologized to who? Because I read that Bill apologized, and then I read that Wilt apologized. Who apologized?
Bill apologized first in private. Then he did it publicly during an interview. He said he had said something that was very injurious to Wilt. He didn't want to go into it again and rehash it, but he had said something privately to Wilt, and then he said it again in the 90s. Now, I will tell you another little story. In the 70s, he had actually attempted to reach out to Wilt, but at that time, Wilt didn't want to hear it. I mean, he was just fired up, and Wilt at the time was dealing, as you started to allude to earlier, and we'll go into this at another time, sure. From a social standpoint, Wilt had been denigrated by a lot of blacks for supporting Nixon. And so he was catching it a little friction from Kareem at that point. And Kareem's,
And
youth
Kareem was not shy. Yeah, that's a
no.
whole nother
He was
room.
so
Yep.
early 70s, he was catching it for a little bit from Kareem. And he was catching it from Russell, and it was still raw about Russell because it only happened a couple of years earlier, and so it just wasn't, the timing was off. But around the 90s, conversations started to happen, and like I said, I talk about this in my article a lot. I actually, one segment of the article is about them, even though it's more about Russell. And they got it together, thank God, because around the early 90s, Wilt was already having issues with congestive heart failure. And then in 99, then he succumbs and he's gone.
Thank you, Hawk. It was like I kept reading different things
Yeah.
on what happened and how it happened. And then I read something that said, okay, 98 is when, when they got together. I'm glad they were able to rehash 98.
It was long before that.
Okay, that's good. That's it's like I kept reading different. Okay, like I was like, what is the real story? Like people
But
are guessing now.
it was still 24 years. You go from 69 to about 92, 93 when they do the commercial with Shaq. That was the one that was the real icebreaker, because the whole set for the commercial was tense. And Wilt went over and shook hands and said something. And right after the commercial, and I don't know if I said this earlier, right after the commercial, Bill, who was relieved that it was over with, because he said, "Hey, it's about time." He looked at Wilt. He said, "You're the only person who really understands me." And that was it.
Yeah, so we went through his whole playing career. We went through his years beginning, but the years following for Bill Russell, it's interesting because there was a period after he retired that he was a little reclusive, and then after Will Chamberlain died, he started to make more appearances. But the one thing I will say about Bill Russell, he was when you saw him, he extended an open hand to, the NBA players of whatever time and era that were out there. He was, he basically wanted to be there for those players that came in after him. You saw the video. I'm sure everyone saw the video of him speaking with Kevin Garnett. That cackle. He even went to things like he attended college, but really the big three, like the first season of the big three, I never forget seeing him on the sidelines and just how much that had to mean to the players and Ice Cube and Clyde Drexler and the players that were involved in the big three. That had to be such a lift. He just loved the game and supported the players of the game, not just the NBA. And like through the time he was 88, he was going. I mean, last year he wasn't as active going to games and things, not as active. But before then, you saw Bill everywhere. You saw him on the sidelines. You saw him. You heard that cackle in interviews. Like he was still around making his presence known. And he will be missed forever. But his legacy is forever. Like he left a mark, and his legacy will last forever. There's countless books out there. His history is documented. I wish they would retire the number 6 across the league. Somebody was prepping a doc. I heard. I don't know if that's going to still happen, but there was a doc being prepared on Bill Russell. This Bill Russell, because I see Bill Russell stories interwoven with other things, not just his. But I just wanted to say those words that he will always be missed, and his legend is forever. Like people like Dime and Hawk will keep his name out here for forever. Dime, anything you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing about Bill that stuck out. I mean, obviously, as a kid, I knew about the whole all his work in civil rights and all that, but I think the actual basketball player part gets diminished a lot. And I just think, obviously, some with the lack of footage we have, sometimes the eye test with him, especially not being like a flashy offensive player, can kind of hurt him. But you really need to just see the game from that lens, the way it was played. And I think ultimately, playing sports, I've realized my whole life, and just watching sports is really, when you talk about these incredibly great players, it's the mental game that really is the separator. And I don't want to underestimate with that mental toughness, that will to win, and what a difference it can be. And sometimes I know it's really cliche, but sometimes guys just want to win more. Sometimes it just means more to them. And Russell's just one of those guys. And the way he kind of sacrificed, individual recognition with stats relative to other players, in an era where, as we said, blocks didn't exist and just focused on winning and did it every single year, is just it's just a lesson to me that, I'll leave it with this. It's not a coincidence that the player that has led the most teams to a championship never led his team in scoring one time. I'm going to leave it at that.
Jay, you can go ahead, and then Dime and I, then we'll, Hoops, you can say a few words and we'll close out.
Another interesting thing about Russell post Celtics is that he basically helped the Supersonics get their franchise to the point where Lenny Wilkens takes over and wins that championship in Seattle, because they were like a 35 win team basically for 2 years, and then Russell gets on board and kind of is trying to instill the quote unquote Celtic way. But he's Bill Russell. He's surly. He's hard to get along with. Um, but he wants to play team oriented ball, and and the team improves. It goes to the playoffs, and he kind of walks away, and Lenny Wilkens takes that team to a championship. And so Bill Russell is now, he did have that stint with the Sacramento Kings, but that says more about the Sacramento Kings, I think, than Bill Russell, because that was not successful. And and Dime probably, I don't know if Dime has gotten to this era of basketball yet where Bill is a commentator. And if you've ever watched Bill Russell commentate or do color commentary on a basketball game, it is vicious. Like, it's not the buddy buddy, you know, comment like Nas, like, nah, this guy's an idiot. He should have slid his feet there. I don't know what this guy's doing, or he has no clue what's going on. I don't know why he's on the floor. It's 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 brutal. Like, and I can't imagine watching an NBA game. But what's funny is that in a lot of ways, that's kind of what this game needs, because of the lack of fundamentals and the lack of sometimes application of this amazing technical skill set that today's players have. Sometimes the knowing of when to execute what, when, and in a team concept is lacking. And Bill would kind of just point it out in a no nonsense, way. And so I think that's that. I mean, obviously, it's not nearly as big a part of his legacy as the Celtics tenure, but Bill, you know, was always trying to give back to the game, whether it was mentoring players or coaching or color commentating. He was always trying to give back to the community. He was always trying to give back to the game, and that's the other thing I think people really appreciated um, about Bill, is even when he was shunning Boston, he didn't shun the game, and he was always a open door, for players who wanted to learn from him, who wanted to, pick his brain about things.
Thank you, Jay. Hoops. Okay, Hoops may not be there. Dime. Oh, Hoops, you there?
Oh, sorry about that. I was just gonna say, you guys got it. I don't have anything to add right now.
Okay. Dime, anything you want to say
Well, I just
as we
want to say
close out?
thanks to you for hosting, and thanks to the speakers and everybody who's listened to this. I hope you guys have, I know some of you guys down there are very knowledgeable. But I hope you guys learned some new stuff about Bill. And, I think Bill, personally, just the way I see the game, has as great of a case as the greatest ever as anybody. He's won the most championships as the best player on his team, more than anybody, more than MJ. Um, and I think a lot of people seem to value best player on a championship team a lot. But when it comes to Russell, we do all these mental gymnastics because of the team, amount of teams and all that. But I hope when we contextualize all his playoff runs, you see that every single season has its own story, just like in today's game. And it's not as easy as it seems. When you look at it back in history and just say, oh, they won 8 rings in a row, it makes it seem like it's easy. But when you look at it and how close they were to not winning at times, it just shows how mentally tough and how clutch that Celtics team really was. And it all starts with Bill. So it was a big loss for the basketball world. And you're damn right. I'm not going to stop showing my love to Bill. He just resonates with a lot of things I've learned about the game. Like I just listen to him talk, and it all resonates with everything I've learned about basketball. And you can see why he's won. Like to me, you can see why he's won in the way he talks. But and Jay, to answer the thing about the commentary, no, I haven't gone to that point. But when quarantine, I did watch the 1980 finals, and he did color commentary for all those games. And even though it's not like the most seamless fit for him in that role, he clearly like understands like the game. I mean, obviously, I'm not even denying that he doesn't like. I'm not saying that he doesn't. He's not one of the most smart basketball minds ever, but you can still tell, even though he may not articulate it as well as certain other color commentators, he still has got the right idea with everything he's talking about. So, a basketball IQ translates, and no different with him.
Thanks, guys, for stepping by. Like Dime Dropper, just dropped an amazing episode, on his personal tribute to Bill Russell. So check that out on his YouTube page. You can follow him, and it's on his page, or you can look at the first video that's in this Jumbotron. You can check me out. I do have shows coming up talking about the ABA, reading some books on that. The end of the month, we will be talking to Jeff Pearlman. We'll be talking about Three Ring Circus, his book on the Kobe Shaq years. So join us for that discussion on August 31st, where we will discuss Three Ring Circus and the Kobe Shaq years, that book on the Kobe Shaq years. But next week, we'll be back talking some ABA. I'll be doing the series on the ABA going forward. And the first install, I'm thinking, is next week. So definitely check us out. But one of the rooms I have coming up, because I think this is necessary, is looking at Red Auerbach. I have been curious about Red Auerbach for so long because of the reputation he had in the 80s with the Larry Bird teams. And then, you look at the history of Red Auerbach and, like what the work he did with, like in him coaching Bill Russell and then hiring him as the first black head coach, but the way that those 80s Celtics teams, like the fact that white players were the dominant, out. Basically, we know what I'm trying to say. I'm just so tired. But I want to look at Red Auerbach because he's interesting. Um, and so we're going to look at Red Auerbach at some point. But join us next week as we launch a series on the ABA. I'm going to do a room every month on the ABA moving forward because it's the forgotten league. Those players just got some money, and I just want to celebrate them by highlighting them once a month, picking a different topic from the ABA. So check me out, and thank you. This is being recorded, so you can play it back anytime. And have a good night, everyone.
Have a good night, Malika. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Malika, for this space, Malika.
One love. Bye.